Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So, it's already spoiler season for Ravnica Allegiance.
True. And they have wasted no time. They've got right to the thick of it. Now, I've obviously, Blood Crypt, Breeding Pool, Godless Shrine, Hallowed Fountain, Stomping Ground, among the most likely to be the most impactful, but no surprise. However, there were plenty of new reveals, including mechanics.
Do you speak of the Spectacle?
Of course. And the way Spectacle works is you can, when a card has Spectacle, you may cast this spell for its Spectacle cost rather than its mana cost if an opponent lost life this turn. So it kind of functions like, so on the one hand, it's a little bit like Kicker, but on the other hand, sometimes the cards are actually cheaper. And there are some cards that, so it's a little bit like alternate cost. Like if you complete the quest of making your opponent lose life, some of the cards get cheaper, like Light Up the Stage, which is 2 and a red. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. It can just be played for 2 and a red as a sorcery, but it also has Spectacle of red. So if your opponent lost life, you can just use it as, you can make a 1 mana draw 2.
Well,
and then go ahead.
It's not quite a draw 2, right? So
you have to use them this turn and lose them.
Yeah, if it was, 2 and a red, just draw 2, so it's like a red divination, give that Spectacle. I think that this is substantially worse than a divination, though, isn't it?
You can play the land off of it, though.
Yeah, but just sake of argument, what if you flipped over like Mountain, right? Then it's kind of bad.
Yeah, but that's not substantially worse. If you were playing some kind of red aggro deck and you flipped over Mountain, well, the difference between Mountain and Mountain isn't that big, and you didn't want to draw those 2 cards for the next 2 turns anyway.
Yeah, whereas, I'm just saying it's just not as good of as a res divination, probably.
Yeah, I'm just saying I think it's most of divination for the purpose of a red aggro deck that's like real low to the ground. I don't know.
Maybe.
It's also Spectacle can also be used the other way as like a kicker, such as on Rix Mahdi Reveler, which is 1 in a red for a 2/2 with Spectacle 2 black red. And when Rix Mahdi Reveler enters the battlefield, discard a card, then draw a card. If Rix Mahdi Reveler's Spectacle cost was paid, instead discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. So this one gives you some modality. You can play it as a 2-mana 2/2 that lets you discard a card and then draw a card, which is already kind of interesting, right?
I think this card's very, very good.
But then if you hit your opponent, you can get a Bedlam Reveler out of the deal.
Yep. So, there's a lot of different layers to this card, right? I think just the boringest Rix Mahdi Reveler, you just cast it on turn 2 and you just loot once, right? And that's still okay.
Oh, definitely.
And then it's like I don't know, it's potentially a little bit worse than a loot if you just do it on turn 2. But one of the things I love about this card is if it's your last card and you just cast it, then you have nothing to discard, so you discard nothing, you just draw a card. So it's just cantrip guy, which I think this card is great on 2 because in standard, for example, a lot of the red aggro decks only have 22 lands, but they have 6 or 8 4-drops. So you might want to dig for land, or you might want to discard an extra land. If you do Tremendous, or you might want to discard your main deck Lava Coil if you're in a control matchup, for example. But then I actually think, quote, mono red decks might just play Blood Crypt and Dragon Skull Summit for the Spectacle on this, because this is quite powerful in the mid game, don't you think? You're just ripping this card and getting in with creatures so they lose some life from an attack, and then it's your last card, and instead of discarding 0 cards to draw 1, you're just discarding just 0 cards to draw 3. That's very strong, I think.
Yeah, I think it's even more so a late game card, but the potential starting in the mid game to have this option for a refill is it's a very powerful added dimension. And so even if you're just splashing a little bit of black into your nearly mono red deck, you've got access to stuff like Blood Crypt. It's not a very expensive splash.
Yeah, it's real reminiscent to me of these previous red decks that were just splashing black lands just to buy back Scrap Heap Scrounger, right? They were just otherwise mono red deck.
Right. And because you can afford to not have the black for a while. Like you could just, like Rick's Mighty Reveler just plays without it.
Yeah, you could afford to not have it never, right? So all right, so you just don't draw 3, you just play them for 2 and you only get to draw 1 card. It's still not bad. It's fine.
Right. There was one other spectacle card previewed, just a sort of generic draft common. Although actually, before we get to that, Rick's Mighty Reveler, this card seems like, it's got chances of being a modern playable card, right?
I'm a little skeptical about it being modern playable. Yeah, but there's not really a shelf for it, and it's I think it's a little low power. Like nobody plays Abbot of Carol Keep, for example, the 2/1 guy with prowess, and I think that card is much stronger than this card for modern.
Well,
you played it in Zoo, right? The Abbot.
Yeah, but even then it was very fringe. The part I'm looking at is Merfolk Trader has some pedigree in modern, right? Or legacy or powered formats at all.
Oh, like just like a little reanimation setup.
Right, like if there's some kind of a deck that can take advantage, I think in order for this guy to make sense, you got to actually want both parts. You got to be in for both this guy's ability to be a relatively efficient way to discard, to loot early with an aggressive body, but also you're playing a deck where you realistically are going to take advantage of a Bedlam Reveler type effect. Like for instance, if this guy is a pair, if you're using this alongside Flameblade Adept, Fiery Temper, you could potentially be involved with some sort of reanimator stuff. You could be discarding any kind of Phoenix, for instance. You could be discarding, basically you want to discard something. If your deck has a bunch of cards that you want to discard anyway, and you're interested in Bedlam Reveling, and you care about the aggression, because part of what you're paying for is that the body is like not embarrassing.
Yeah, so you're imagining this maybe in a Mardu shell rather than like a red aggro shell. Like
I'm not talking about an aggro.
Like you discarding a lingering
kind of aggressive. Could also just be like you're using stuff like whether it's any of the miscellaneous Phoenixes or Blood Ghasts or because this card's pretty good with all that kind of stuff. If you're playing like some sort of aggressive graveyard deck. Like there's something here. And heaven forbid you use Rick's Mahdi's spectacle cost and start dredging, right? Like you discarded Golgari, Golgari Grave Troll, and then immediately get to draw it from the draw part.
Oh, you could discard a Vengevine with this, and it's a creature cast.
Right, and then as long as you can find one more creature.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think you might have something there. Maybe this is much stronger in modern than I mean, you know me. I'm on Eidolon of the Great Revel on the brain to start every single time. If there's a,
I don't think it's a red aggro card.
No, it's not. But I think you got my juices flowing for the Mardu or for the Vengevine or.
Well, there's one other angle this guy's got, which is that he's a human. And the way Spectacle is set up, you can use cards like Unclaimed Territory and Cavernous Souls to pay Spectacle costs. So it's kind of interesting that you can splash this, right? Like your human deck or whatever has that. Now, maybe it's just not doing enough because I don't know how much value you're getting out of the looting in the first place. But this is actually realistically empty its hand and appreciate the value of a little bit of Reveler action.
Yeah, I don't hate this in humans. Like I think a lot of the time, I've played countless matches against humans, and I think that a lot of the time when you're beating them, it's just they're just play their stuff out, their stuff gets killed, and then they're just ripping cards off the top, and they just draw 2 lands in a row or something, and they just don't win. And like that happens like all the time. And they've got like, all right, I have an Aether Vial, I can just happen to draw anything. You're pretty low, and just like, nope, basic island for you.
And like looting away a land or a second vial or something could be actually really nice. Being able to get a little bit more card flow. And there's plenty of humans that are the wrong human at the wrong time. So it might not be the worst to have this looting ability, you know? Yeah. Plus, a human's deck is very capable of getting that damage in. You attack with even just a Kite Sail freebooter and you're there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that perspective, I think it might have a little something there. It doesn't hit very hard for a modern humans deck, but
but neither does Meddling Mage or any of the other, you know what I mean? Like any of the other hate bears.
That's fair. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm much more apt to imagine this discarding a Vengevine or a Lingering Souls than being in humans, but I don't have it at a 0 for sure.
I mean, definitely the first place I'm looking for a card like this is somebody who's already in the market for Faithless Looting. You know, like,
that's any Faithless Looting deck.
Like if you're already a Faithless Looting deck, you know, that's I would start with that. I'm not as keen on. I mean, it's okay. It's interesting to try Rix Mahdi in just like a humans deck, but I definitely think step one is consider Faithless Looting decks.
You know, Patrick, there is already a mono red Faithless Looting deck, right? Like this guy could go in there, and that deck has Manamorphose. So if you needed to hit the black, it's not too difficult.
Yeah. It'd be easy to add a splash of black anyway. So there is one more that's kind of just a draft card, but Rafter Demon is 2 black red for a 4/2, and it has Spectacle 3 black red. And when it enters the battlefield, if its Spectacle cost was paid, each opponent discards a card. So nothing too fancy, just a 4-mana 4/2, not a great rate. That if you can complete the quest, you can buy a 5-mana Ravenous Rat.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, compare it to other forecasting cost cards that people actually play in Constructed, like a Crackling Drake, for example. This card's card advantage capability is kind of laughable compared to, a staple card like Crackling Drake, and it lacks all of the other advantages of a card like that. Just not going to be played in Constructed.
Right. There's another 4-cost Rakdos card that they revealed that I also don't think is super likely to be a major Constructed player, but this one's a lot more of a consideration, and that's Rakdos Firewheeler, which is black, red for a 4/3 human rogue. When Rakdos Firewheeler enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to target opponent and 2 damage to up to 1 target creature or planeswalker.
I'm a little warmer on this card, which is Wheeling Fire, than you are, I think. I think this card, its major knock against it is that there is no shell for a deck that can hit BBRR right now. But, I mean, this card is substantially better, at least in some contexts, than multiple forecasting cost cards that we've seen played either 18 years ago or 18 months ago, right? Like, this card compares pretty favorably to, like, a Sand Strangler. Sand Strangler had
that's true.
Some constraints on it, right? You'd have to have a desert, right, for it to be good, which is not so different than having a second color. And this card, I guess it's far better than a Flametongue Kavu sometimes and worse than a Flametongue Kavu sometimes. But, like, it's very reminiscent of that card. Like, you don't have to kill itself, right? Like, oftentimes you'd be like, Flametongue Kavu would, like, kill your Bird of Paradise or something. That's the only way you can get it into play. That's not going to happen. And this deals damage to opponents. It can mess up planeswalkers. I think this card is actually pretty good. Like, assuming
I think you're right.
You find a shell for it. That's all.
It reminds me in some ways of Gatu Fireslinger. And then instead of paying 3 with Echo, you're just paying 4 up front. But then instead of being a 2/2, it's a 4/3 and domes your opponent for 2.
Yeah, I don't know. I've got a warm consideration in my heart for Rakdos Firewheeler. I'm not sure it's going to be great, but
it's just there's such tough competition at 4. But you're right. I think you're right. I think it deserves a look.
Who knows what the decks are going to look like? That's the thing. Like right now, yeah, there's no spot for this card in Standard. But when we see a whole set full of additional cards that are designed to be played in decks that have both black and red in them, maybe. Like, I think this guy would love to be in the same squad with, like, Goblin Chain Whirler, right? I mean, although that's two incredibly aggressive costs next to each other in terms of how much colored mana is required. But, like, I just love to see those guys. I mean, just irrespective of mana considerations, just playing next to each other, that's going to be an impressive amount of high power, decent sized bodies, and 187 action, putting pressure on the opponent.
Yep. So there was one other mechanic revealed, which is Afterlife. And it's not clear what else there, if Afterlife has other numbers, but at the moment, the two cards they previewed with Afterlife are each Afterlife 1. First, the common Imperious Oligarch is just white-black for a 2/1 Vigilance with Afterlife 1. When this creature dies, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. So it would seem to suggest the Afterlife, that it says Afterlife 1. Maybe Afterlife 1 means you make 1/1 flying white and black spirit creature, Or it could be that you make a 1/1 instead of a 2/2 or a 3/3 or whatever. We'll have to see when we see other cards with Afterlife.
Yeah, so what do you think about the Imperious Oligarch? Do you think this is going to be, pushing up against a playable?
Nah.
So my initial reaction is similar to yours, especially, when compared to Tithe Taker, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in a second. Tithe Taker is such a stronger card. But what if, there's just a lot of cards like this? And then maybe there's some sort of, Well,
I think they get worse when there's more.
Really?
The payoff, then, yeah, they could be better. But in general, you're setting yourself up so that more of the same types of, you have more weakness to the same types of cards. If your deck has lots of Afterlife cards, and this is an extreme example, but think about how much better Anger of the Gods is against you if you're paying for all these cards with Afterlife.
Oh, I was just really kind of thinking, if you're going to play 1-for-1 removal against, obviously Anger of the Gods is just globally designed to mess with something like this. But if you're just killing creatures 1-for-1, the fact that they're getting a potentially relevant 1/1 flying creature each time, that's one thing. But then separately, what if there's probably a husk, right? If there's a husk in the format, then these guys they're going to be.
Yeah, but there's no shortage of things you could. There's no shortage of things you could sacrifice. I guess I'm just saying that if you're playing this removal, the 7th Afterlife guy you have isn't better than the first. They're using their removal how they're using their removal. If you're playing his Termit Doomblade guy, he's just got nothing but Doomblades. Whether you have 6 or 7 Afterlife guys isn't nearly as important. Whereas if you're playing against somebody who has a 1/2 flyer, all these extra 1/1 flyers you're paying for have greatly diminished utility.
Man, 1/2 flyer guy, he's gonna. Well, who's really gonna beat you? 1/3 flyer guy.
What about Goblin Chain Whirler guy?
Oh well, yeah. 100% of the Afterlife creatures we've seen so far would be messed up by Goblin Chain Whirler guy.
So Tithe Taker, the rare that you alluded to earlier, is 1 and a white for a 2/1. During your turn, spells your opponents cast cost 1 more to cast, and abilities your opponents activate cost 1 more to activate unless they're mana abilities. And this guy's Afterlife 1.
This guy's great, right?
I don't know. No, I don't think so. Why? Why would this be great?
He's got all the abilities that the white 2-drops that get played in some decks all jammed into one. He's like a little bit of Athalia, but he's asymmetrical, and he's a little bit of a Leonin Arbiter. Just a little bit. And then you get a little Afterlife action on top of it. I think this card's going to be popular in some decks.
In Standard?
I think, first, I'd have to see what the rest of what's going on in Standard looks like, but I can see him being played in the decks that like a Leonin Arbiter and or Athalia right now, and obviously in other formats.
But he doesn't stop them from comboing off. He only stops them from comboing off on your turn.
Oh, well, that's true.
That's like the worst time. Like, he is the mildest anti-counterspell technology, but like he doesn't stop a storm. He's like a Thalia or a Leonin Arbiter, except that he isn't any good at all against combos or like take the cards that Thalia and Leonin Arbiter are good against. This guy isn't good against them. He just looks sort of like them so as to con people into subscribing to his newsletter.
Oh, so you're saying like, all right, your Settle the Wreckage costs 5, but I still got to bin all my guys.
I mean, if you're imagining the dream scenario where your opponent has exactly 4 mana and Settle, and it's got to be a situational thing like Settle, because if they just had something like 4 mana draw 2, they could just cast it in response. But in the event that your opponent has a Settle and exactly 4 mana, you can put this down. But like, so
I think you've convinced me. Yeah, I was pretty warm on this guy, but no longer. Tithe Taker will not get 10% of my earnings. Switch.
We'll see what the format looks like, but I don't know. You'd have to really care. And I just like the format could go a different direction, but I just don't see myself caring very much in Standard. And I just don't see this card being very high impact in Modern. Or whatever. Maybe the card's got purpose. It's not out of the question. It's a you're not paying that much for this ability. It just doesn't seem like that useful of an ability to me at the moment.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you could just be getting like a better body for that 2 mana, right? Like you could be picking up some first strike. You'd be picking up at the very least a second toughness in some format.
I would not compare it to Leonin Arbor or Thalia though, because this card, its ability doesn't function anything like them. It's like it's like a Thalia when your opponent is comboing off on your turn. Who cares?
I don't even know what decks do that.
None. This is okay. This is a smart design by them, but low power. But who knows? We'll see. There's a different hate bear, though, since apparently this is the hate bear set. Lavinia Azorius Renegade is white-blue for a 2/2. And here's a natural couple of Robo Rosewater lines of text. Each opponent can't cast non-creature spells with converted mana cost greater than the number of lands that player controls. And whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. So, when you put this card down, your opponents, if they try to put any zeros, like Moxes or something, they're countered. If your opponent tries
Nourishing Shoal.
If your opponent tries to do alternate costs, like Blazing Shoal, Nourishing Shoal, Force of Will, anything like that, Mental Misstep, anything like that, it's countered. So that ability has tons of immediate obvious applications. Now, each opponent can't cast non-creature spells with converted mana cost greater than the number of lands that player controls. And notably, that bottom ability where it's 0, if no mana was spent, counter that spell, that works on creatures. But the first ability, it's only non-creature spells with converted mana cost greater than the number of lands that player controls. So, for instance, if your opponent casts a bunch of rituals so they can cast ad nauseum, they just can't. They would need to get 5 land in play.
So this is an outstanding card against like certain types of storm or, I guess, storm or Teps kind of decks, right?
Teps like storm?
Yeah, storm.
Good. I mean, a lot of things are, but this is just another blend of different types of things to hate on. Obviously this card doesn't seem like inherently good in Standard, but some combo could arise that makes it worthwhile.
I think it's not 0. Just this is pretty corner. And I think like in other years, you're like, oh, that's too corner, but it already won a Grand Prix, so I think it's like not that corner. Like this does turn off flipping over a Sanctum of the Sun and then getting you with like a gigantic Banefire. Like it will stop that, especially if the opponent is a little tight on land. And I think like if you want to side that in against that kind of a strategy, blue and white is a good spot to do it. And oftentimes an opponent who's doing something like that is not going to have a lot of removal that's good for killing 2-drops. So I think it's not 0. I just don't think it's not a whole lot more than 0 though.
That's probably fair. It's because that doesn't sound like a super appealing line, but I could see it.
But it won a Grand Prix. That's the thing.
But I don't think it would be good against that deck. But I do think your reasoning is right. Like there could be some version of that deck that also has some of the thing that you want to shut down with this. Like we haven't seen what all cards might be played without paying any mana. In powered formats, however, if you play this against Belcher, you're kind of locking him out. Like there is a little bit of that like Chalice of the Void experience where when you put
this is it against Belcher, isn't it?
When you put Lavinia down, it's a Chalice of the Void for 0. Like that's already part of the deal. You get a Chalice of the Void for 0 up front, and then you also get interaction. You get to shut off Force of Will, and you get to shut off ad nauseum most of the time. Like there's some weird different fringe interactions this card has.
Even if Belcher got around all that stuff, right? Like they only have like 1 or 2 lands in their entire deck. And their kill cards, whether it's Empty the Warrens or Goblin Charbelcher, cost 4, right? So they can't ever cast them. They never have 4 land in play.
If they're not playing Burning Wish, they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, that's very.
You need a Burning Wish for Massacre. So Lavinia, slightly more exciting. Hate Bear, not slightly. A lot more exciting, I think, and but specifically for powered formats, probably. Also as a legend, so potentially some synergies there. Not exactly the first commander I would choose, but there is a little bit of a taste of the Simic Guild. Nothing too fancy. It's not clear what their theme is going to be yet, but. First, there's Growth Spiral, which is an interesting card. Growth Spiral, like Explore, this card looks right up your alley. Green, blue, instant. Draw a card. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield.
I think this card is spectacular. I think this might just be the best card in the set. It seems awesome to me.
This is the best card in the set.
Might be. Like on turn 2, you just like your blue deck, you just leave up your mana to cast Essence Scatter or Syncopate or whatever, and then if they didn't do anything, you just Growth Spiral and you draw a card and you're on 4 on turn 3. Like what more could you want in life? Like that's so great. I think this is fantastic.
That sounds super good.
Like
that sounds amazing in Modern. Like if people already play Explore.
Like
ability to Growth Spiral in your Scape Shift deck? Are you kidding me?
Or think about
doesn't that seem amazing? You're playing a Scape Shift deck and you can just Growth Spiral when they didn't play anything into your Snapcaster Mage.
Oh yeah, and you could snap this card. And the other thing is, like a lot of the cards that are really powerful that are of similar profiles, right? Like either other green cards like a Rampant Growth, for example, or even like what's like a really direct comparison card to this? Like a
Explorer?
Yeah, well, Explorer is weaker than this from the perspective that I'm thinking of, a Simic Signet or something. Is that like it's an instant speed draw card, right? Like if you rip this and you rip this on turn 10 while you're getting beaten down, and let's say you ripped a Rampant Growth instead. That's just like ripping a land. You're going to keep getting beaten down. You rip a Growth Spiral, you might get there. That's different. It's a powerful card.
So this seems pretty sweet. And the play in Standard of just your opponent doesn't play into your counterspell, so you advance your mana so you can just drop your Planeswalker a turn earlier or whatever.
Yeah, they just didn't take their turn, right? Like
there's just no way that Alian Trazi isn't all over this card.
I mean, I just imagine always having Karnan play on turn 3 if I'm him, right? that's what's gonna go. That's what's gonna happen, or whatever, right? Like I think this card is going to be a really important enabler. Probably the Nexus of Fate deck is going to pick back up in popularity. Like this card is really strong. I think. Like I don't know. You've always been more of the type of what are the awesome things that we can do, like cast Jace the Mind Sculptor. Like how do we put the pieces together? I've always been more the type of
I'm more the type to say like, what are the awesome things we can do?
Yeah, like Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Sure. What are the awesome? What's your position? What do you propose instead of doing awesome things?
I guess I'm also that type now that I think about it. Like I just want to cast a dragon, but like I guess for a minute I was fancying myself as the type who likes library manipulation, but I guess I'm not. I guess I'm also casting awesome.
Oh, is that so? Eidolon, a great Revels guy.
Yeah, I'm not that type at all. I'm really just let's slam a threat, but I can appreciate that. You once said to me, sometimes they make card draw that's too good, and it's our responsibility to play it, right? I think Growth Spiral is, assuming there's a deck that can tap for G and U on turn 2, I think this card falls squarely into sometimes they make library manipulation that's too good. It's our responsibility to play it.
All right, it'd be interesting. It looks pretty sick. What do you, man? Plus, you can use 2 Explorers now. Like, it's gonna be like going turbo. Like who knows what kind of deck might get banned if you have access to that much Explore.
Who knows how many lands you'll have in play on any given turn? 2 Explorers.
Simic Ascendancy is green-blue for an enchantment. It has 3 abilities, 79 words. Who knows? No, it's green-blue for an enchantment with 1 green-blue. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So that first ability alone is already like we're talking better than Dragon Blood in a Simic deck. That you can use it multiple times a turn, and it only costs 2 to play instead 2 to cast instead of 3. The second ability,
and 3 isn't the worst for just putting a +1/+1 counter on a creature, even before you start considering other synergies. Like, for example, not Hangerback Walker. What's the one that shoots?
Walking Ballista.
Like Walking Ballista, we were happy to pay 4 to put a +1/+1 counter on, right? So
right, and here you're getting a better deal.
Yeah, so it's just 3 isn't too bad just to begin with.
And then whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, put that many growth counters on Simic Ascendancy, the enchantment. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, if Simic Ascendancy has 20 or more growth counters on it, you win the game.
So I love alternate ways to win the game, but I'm not a big buyer on this card.
Commander.
Oh, well, I hadn't thought of that. All right.
Okay, here is a counterpoint, though. Mishra's Helix.
I don't remember what that does.
Helix Pinnacle, Helix Pinnacle lets you just win the game for the low cost of 101 mana. Simic Ascendancy lets you do it for barely, just a hair over 60, 62, and you can win the game. Now, granted, you need a target, and that's true. Plus, you need to spend colored mana. And it's not hexproof.
Well, here's what I'm thinking. If you have 20 counters on Simic Ascendancy, you probably did some work in terms of getting +1/+1 counters on your guys. Wouldn't you probably have just killed them before then? Like that's why I'm like not a buyer on this card. That said, there are other ways to get +1/+1 counters on your creatures without even using the 1 GU ability on this. That would still put counters on the Simic Ascendancy that might be useful. For example, Shalai, right? Like Shalai is a card you might already want to play, and maybe you could get a bunch of +1/+1 counters on your creatures with Shalai, and maybe that would accelerate your Simic Ascendancy a little bit. I don't know.
And it's worth noting on Shalai that when you give 4 of your creatures a +1/+1 counter at once, Simic Ascendancy actually does get 4 +1/4 counters, because it's when 1 or more counters are put on a creature you control. So for each instance of a creature, you get paid.
Yeah, and then, besides which, there's synergies with things that you, obviously not in standard, like the card's not legal right now, but like a hardened scales, for example, you're at least getting more +1/+1 counters for your money when you're playing with a card like that. Although it's two different instances, right? So you get +1/+1 counter, and then the hardened scales triggers. Is that what happens? Then are you going to get
whenever you put counters on your cards, you're going to be the only thing is that you're not getting +1/+1 counters on here. Remember, hardened scales only triggers from creatures. So like you're not going to get paid on both sides. You put two +1/+1 counters on,
but you're not getting paid on the ascendancy. You're saying,
right? The ascendancy itself still only gets one counter.
Yeah, but it does dramatically increase the rate of the +1/+1 counters of the ascendancy.
For sure. I mean, that's a pretty potent 1-2 punch to just have running.
Yeah, you're never going to get to the 20 counters in the ascendancy, but you might just kill your opponent with all the power you're generating.
Speaking of enchantments, what do you think of Mortify as an enchantment removal card that could be main decked? 1 white/black instant, destroy target creature or an enchantment. A reprint from the original Ravnica.
I think this card is going to change standard. Here are the reasons why. Godless Shrine, Isolated Chapel, throw them into what we're calling a white weenie deck right now. All of a sudden they have Mortify. Throw them into the mono black decks. I know they're not super popular, but there are some. All of a sudden they have Mortify. If you think about like how some of the white weenie decks or their cousins are operating right now, they're like, all right, play some guys, tap them, Conclave Tribunal, get in there. If all of a sudden Mortify is in the format, first of all, it's going to put some pressure against cards like Conclave Tribunal in white decks because some of them are going to play Mortify because they have these black splashes. But separately, like, think about it, right? Like, all right, I Conclave Tribunal your biggest guy, and then I send, right? Mid-combat, you, like, Mortify the Conclave Tribunal. That's a 1-for-1 exchange. But all of a sudden, I get my creature back, right? So that's still kind of 1-for-1 exchange. But now when my creature blocks, I can get a favorable block out of it. It becomes a 2-for-1. It changes. It changes how creatures are going to interact. Separately, it's all well and good to play some of these cards, Simic Ascendancy or, the Tribunal itself, so long as nobody has enchantment removal. But once they have enchantment removal, a lot of the values that are in Standard are going to change, right? Like even like Experimental Frenzy, that value is going to change.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at the amount of juicy targets, there are all those different banishing effects, like you spoke of the Conclave Tribunals of the world, but there's also a lot of strategies. Play some enchantments, whether it's Search for Azcanta, Experimental Frenzy, even History of Benalia, which isn't the perfect hit. It's just more enchantments that are relevant that you could hit. So I think Mortify is a big game.
And hitting just any rando creature for 3 mana is a thing that we're just willing to do. Like Fight with Fire, Beacon Bolt, whatever. Murder. People just pay 3 mana.
This card is easier for an Orzhov deck to play than Murder.
Yeah.
But I just think the enchantments aspect raises the floor. So, like, the number of people where this card is dead is just so much lower. And the flexibility for what kinds of cards you can interact with is just so much higher. Like Ixalan's Binding is another really good one to be able to Mortify.
Sure. I mean, just agree on all counts. I think this is going to be an important card.
I do think this is a card that people are likely going to play 4 copies of too often. It's going to be right to play 4 copies, in some spots for sure. But I think this card has all the makings of a card that people are going to assume you're supposed to play 4 of, when plenty of the time you're only supposed to play 2 or 3 or whatever.
Yeah, aggro decks probably only want to play 2 a lot of the time, if for no other reason than the pressure that's on their mana bases.
Yeah. So a card that puts an incredible amount of pressure on your mana base is Gate Colossus.
But it also gets pressure alleviated by your mana base.
It's an 8 mana 8/8, and it costs 1 less for each gate you control. Gate Colossus can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. And whenever a gate enters the battlefield under your control, you may put Gate Colossus from your graveyard on top of your library.
I want this card to be good so much. It's probably not going to be, though.
In your gate deck?
I mean, if there's Maze's End, I might put some effort into it, but I don't know. Remember Maze's End? The search up my gates, win the game. So first of all, 8/8 for 8 is an interesting rate. Like, it's an interesting rate, and this could be 8/8 for less than 8 sometimes. It's not that bad. But
what are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. But it's also.
Are you telling me who plays 5 mana 8/8?
No one.
Who plays 5 mana 10/10?
But it's also inevitable, right? Because it can always come back over and over again.
Always, quote unquote.
As long as you've got gates coming, it's inevitable.
So if you put the gates in your deck,
yeah,
you can have which each gate you play costs you a mana.
There is a deck building cost.
The second Gate Colossus you play, that's where you start to pull ahead.
Oh, well, no. I'm not interested in the second Gate. The first one is enough. Yeah, like I said, I want this card to be good so bad implies that I don't think it's probably going to be very good.
We've got one last card, and that's the Haunt of Hightower. The Haunt of Hightower is a mythic for 4 black. It's a 3/3 flying lifelink, clearly trying to evoke skeletal vampire in some
art, the casting cost, the size.
So 4 black for a 3/3 legendary vampire. It's a 3/3 flying lifelink. When it attacks, the defending player discards a card. Whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, put a +1/+1 counter on the Haunt of Hightower. It drains vitality from those it touches. What do you think, man?
Well, I like it a lot. But I think that my liking it a lot is probably a little bit skewed from how much action I got from Skeletal Vampire back in the day. Like, Skeletal Vampire was the best creature in Ravnica block construction.
This doesn't play like Skeletal Vampire at all.
No, not at all, right? So here's the thing about...
So why do you like it?
Because it just feels so Skeletal Vampire-y. If you're tapping out for this, it's like a 3/3 for 6. I don't know what the chances are you untap this and play are. Okay, like, that's A, start there. 3/3 for 6, full stop, is not a good rate. However, if you're playing it with more mana open, like, for example, you can play it and then, they go to make a move to kill, 3 toughness, and you zinger them in response by, bolting their guy, which puts a card to their graveyard, and it gets 4 toughness at instant speed. I mean, that's kind of cool, but you have to have 7 mana open. And then, of course, if you can untap with this, and it's got its Hypnotic Spectre action going on, or you can do something to crush multiple permanents while it's already in play. I mean, the card goes crazy. But the problem is you really have to get to that next untap. And even if you do, there's no guarantee that the card goes crazy.
This card is rancid milk.
This card is what, sorry?
Rancid milk.
You think it's spoiled. You think it's smelly. You think it's curdling.
The spoiler has spoiled. I guess in theory, if I were looking to how to play this thing, because Lord knows I'm not looking to, go with hopefully my 3/3 lifelink 6-drop. If I untap and attack with it, will now be 4 flying lifelink, and my opponent has discarded a card. When you have to attack twice with your 6-drop before you even get back up to rate, let alone ahead. And then whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard is obviously the abusable part. But, if you can make this thing work by playing with this untap, or maybe you give it haste, but sometimes you also just mill your opponent for like 13 cards or something.
Yeah.
Who cares? What are you even doing?
You get a life linker. Okay. He links the life. He drinks their death.
Yep. No, this card could put in some, it could get some W's in draft. No, maybe, it could work. Somebody could do it. It's a legendary creature, so maybe you're setting up some kind of goofy combo deck in your...
All right, so let's just think about this for a second. 6 casting cost creatures in Standard. This or Niv Mizzet.
Okay, let's think about this in Standard. 4 casting cost creatures.
Niv Mizzet doesn't even have lifelink.
Let's among 4 cost creatures, this or basically your choice of Rekindling Phoenix or this, if this costs 4. Oh,
Rekindling Phoenix would kick the bejesus out of this guy. That guy doesn't die. Right. There's also a 6/6 flyer in this color for less mana that also fixes your draw.
You're talking about the Demonic Tutor from here on out?
Well, there are many cards that are better than this card at similar casting costs. And as you noted with Rekindling Phoenix, there might be some that are better for less casting cost. But I don't know. I still love it. It has lifelink. It looks like Skeletal Vampire.
All right. I
have leaks. Okay, I have leaks.
Yeah, we all do. The
first time I went real good at a Pro Tour. It's a good record.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. So far, it looks like the nuts and bolts cards like Mortifying Growth Spiral are the pushed ones. It'll be interesting to see what they have to follow up for stronger Afterlife and Spectacle cards, and what the mechanics are for the other 3 guilds. Obviously, the Shocklands have already certainly spoken to a high impact, change to the format.
What's your favorite so far?
Favorite to play, or favorite power?
Either. Answer it however you want. No, not counting Shocklands, of course.
I think that Growth Spiral looks powerful, and I think that Light Up the Stage looks sweet. I bet Light Up the Stage gets some play. I'm into it. What more do you want? What more do you want in this world than a 2-for-1?
Oh well, I've heard that one before. I'm Growth Spiral full stop. I'm most excited, I think, to use kind of your parlance by Rakdos Firewheeler, which itself will be a 2-for-1 quite often.
True. Nice. All right, dude. See you next week.
Bye.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge, so jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault.